Hello and welcome, my name is Disaster. This is Star Wars Battlefront 2, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my personal experiences with the public beta of Star Wars Battlefront 2, which ended just a couple of days ago, as well as try to answer the more interesting question, whether or not you should be buying this game when it launches this November. And in doing so, answering this question, whether or not you should buy it, or to buy or not to buy, if you want to put it in fancy, we're going to be talking about gunplay and weapons. We're going to be talking about the map design of Star Wars Battlefront 2, at least what we can get, the taste that we got from the beta experience, as well as star cards, heroes and elites, and last but certainly most interestingly, who this game really is made for. That being said, and jumping straight into it, let's start with a positive note. Gunplay and weapons. I am generally quite skeptic when it comes to DICE's ability these days to design solid infantry experiences. This comes from seeing Star Wars Battlefront 1, from seeing Battlefield 1 and some of the problems we have there. However, I'd like to note at this point that gunplay and weapon design was pretty damn solid. At least the beta experience was pretty good. Now, there was a bit of a problem in my opinion with too slow of a DPS, but that's personal preference, so let's leave that to one side at this point. What I can however say, and what universally is a sign of good class balance, gunplay, weapon design, that kind of as total package, is clear classes with clear range limitations, clear ranges at which they should be engaging targets. And in the case of Battlefront 2, what you have here is the Assault class, which specializes in close quarter, the Specialist class, which specializes in medium-long range. You have the Heavy class, which specializes at all ranges but medium range, and this is typical flexible weaponry. They can engage at all distances, but they usually are best where other classes don't excel at, and in this case this is medium range. So the Heavy class is best for medium range, and the Officer class is close quarter medium range, but mainly really there just as support class to help your teammates out. But you can do some serious work, especially at medium range with the blaster pistols as well. Now this is great. This means that when you pick a class, you know what you're picking it for. And you can further subdivide this actually when you talk about individual weapons. So in the case of the Specialist class, of course, as all classes in the beta, unless you pre-ordered the game, you only had 2 available weapons. Now one of them was clearly a long range dedicated, so it would be alright for medium range, but if you wanted to get the damage down range, you get it at long range. That's where you'd excel, where you're least likely to get killed when using the weapon, and you could do some serious work, especially by getting headshots, which I think netted about 94 damage, which is almost outright killing another Specialist, which comes in at 100 health, and certainly 2 headshots would down anything but the Heavy class, which means of course the weapon was both satisfying and effective to use. Contrasting that, the other weapon that was available was very different. It had much lower damage but much higher fire rate, but was still very accurate, allowing for an aggressive scout playstyle at medium range to be effective, or a medium long range playstyle where you'd be a little bit more careful. You traded essential raw DPS, time to kill, for more forgiveness because your fire rate was higher, so if you had to place an additional 2 shots down range, you would be able to do so more easily. Now this is just an example looking specifically at the Specialist class. You could take apart pretty much every class in the same way, with different weapons clearly being specialized for different engagement distances, and I really do hope that DICE this time nails the weapon design because they have such creative freedom given that this is a fictional universe. Unlike in the case of, for example, Battlefield 1, where they still tried to stay within the realms of reality, use weapons that did exist, at least theoretically at the time, and were produced at one stage and did perform for a certain engagement distance. In Star Wars Battlefront 2, they can really just do whatever the hell they want, because not only are they in a fictional universe, but what little rules they do have are relatively easy to bend in a sci-fi scenario. Now, facilitating good gunplay, good weapon design is also good map design. And this is the next topic on my list, and this is the thing that truly surprised me for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I'm not one quick to praise map design. Those of you who've watched my Battlefield videos for some time will know I'm usually quite critical of DICE's map design. And in Star Wars Battlefront 2, there was not a lot to complain about, at least on the 2 maps, on the 2 different game modes that we got to play in the public beta. Each time you had all available engagement distances that you could possibly want for the different available classes there in plethora. Now what this means is, independent of which class you chose, if you played on the right part of the map, you could be effective. No class was, I'd say, overrepresented. So in the case specifically, for example, of the Galactic Assault on Naboo, you could play as Specialist, you could play as Officer, you could play as Assault, or you could play as Heavy, and there would at each stage, maybe except for the last stage, be an area where you would be effective with your class. So there was close quarter, there was medium range, and there was long range. So depending on which class you would pick, you would engage at those distances. And this, in my opinion, is a sign of good or at least enjoyable map design, and contrasts strongly with what we have currently in Battlefield 1, where if you look at the last DLC, In the Name of the Tsar, for example, 99% of all engagement distances are long range, and I think 4 out of 5 maps are essentially long range focused, and the other one is long range with a little bit of close quarters. Generally, the engagement distances in Battlefield 1 are not anywhere close to as balanced on most maps. There is exceptions, and this is not an absolute rule. Then at least it seemed to be the case in Star Wars Battlefront 2's beta. Now, this may just be intelligent choice of maps for the beta, but if we take the beta as a representation of the rest of the game, then map design seems to be the best part, in my opinion, of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, having talked about some positive aspects of the game, no video would be complete without a little bit of salt, without some of the negative parts of Star Wars Battlefront 2, of my experience of Star Wars Battlefront 2 in beta. Now, one of them is the way star cards are set up. Now, I'm aware star cards are part of Star Wars Battlefront 2, independent of how casual of a mechanic they are. This is the game, this is the way the game works, and that is absolutely fine. There's two kinds of star cards, at least personally, that was my experience. There's kind of the, I'd say, more passive abilities, either the abilities that are actually passive and, for example, recharge your other abilities faster or extend the length of one of your abilities, or more passive abilities in that they are not used as aggressor. They're used, for example, to heal yourself more quickly or activate a health boost at a certain time. Those star cards, those abilities, I didn't find to be too intrusive on the game. I thought they were fine. I thought they were enjoyable. But then there was the other category of star cards. And kind of the poster child of those is the Vanguard for the Assault, which is this close quarter shotgun ability that you can essentially activate, and then you start one-banging people. Not only were a lot of them very inconsistent, both for the user and the person getting shot in the face by them, but they were in many situations just plain out OP. And that's not a good thing, in my opinion, to be very honest with you. I don't want people using star cards as primary engagement method over primary weaponry. Then the weapons are not good enough. This is the problem we had to a certain extent still now, but especially at the beginning of Battlefield 1's life cycle, where grenades and gadgets were a more effective way of taking out targets than actually using your weaponry, your primary weapon, be that an LMG or SMG or whatever the hell you were running with. I don't want that in Star Wars Battlefront 2 for the same reason I didn't want it in Battlefield 1. It's cheesy, it doesn't make for enjoyable combat, it's also very unpredictable. So if they can fix a couple of the star cards which I think are a little bit on the OP side, there were some of them which were definitely not. There was one for the Specialist class which allowed you to essentially whip out a G18, a Glock 18 essentially, fast-firing close-quarter pistol to take out a target if you were pushed. Now this was an advantage, it was a better weapon than your enemies would be running, even the Assault class, but you did have half the health of some of the classes you were facing, so that was balanced in a kind of a sensible way, and you didn't find yourself getting just wrecked by it or wrecking everybody when equipping it. It was kind of a last-ditch opportunity. Whereas other cards, like the Vanguard, were in my opinion just overused and OP. And it raises the question, of course, of pay to win, because if you don't buy kind of the best version of Star Wars Battlefront 2 or put money in afterwards, I'm sure you'll be able to actually purchase the loot crates that you can get. You're not going to have access to all of these cards anywhere close to as quickly as those who are willing to just, you know, splash out the cash and get everything from day one. Just something I want to raise. Personally, while I'm not confident that they'll balance out the individual star cards against each other, I am confident that actually the pay to win is going to be kept at a point where it's not too intrusive on those of us who do not want to spend $120 on Star Wars Battlefront 2. The second part of the game mechanics where I'm a little bit still critical over are heroes and elites. Now, they're fun, but they're cancer. That's the best way of putting it, really. I mean, if you thought, you know, the elite classes in Battlefield 1 were a bad thing, were just not enjoyable, shouldn't be in the game, then please do not buy Star Wars Battlefront 2, because you're going to be the saltiest of players possible out there. Because Star Wars Battlefront 2 revolves around the heroes and elites. If you're a good player, if you do well, you get a kill streak running as infantry player, you'll have the points, the battle points, to buy the heroes and elites. And it's a much better system, to be honest, than the random picking it up on the battlefield. It at least gives those players who are semi-competent at the game a more frequent opportunity to pick those classes. You have to, of course, note they are limited in number on the battlefield, so you can have all the battle points you want. If Darth Maul is already running around on Naboo on Galactic Assault, you can't pick him again. There can't be two Darth Mauls simultaneously on the battlefield. You can wait for the individual using Darth Maul to die, if he does die. More on that later anyway. But you're never going to be able to run them two at a time. So it's a better system than they had in Star Wars Battlefront 1. It's still gonna lead to some frustrations because you're gonna get killed by stuff which, as for example specialist or assault player, there is no way of you countering other than physically not being at that specific point on the map at that specific point in time. There's no way of you avoiding or preempting getting killed by Darth Maul on the second stage of Galactic Assault on Naboo. Speaking of those heroes, I think there's some more balancing that needs to be done there as well. Not so much for the specialist class, the elites if you so will, the heavy battle droids or the flame troopers, that actually does need a buff, but the rocket troopers were also completely fine in my opinion. But specifically the lightsaber wielding heroes, so in the case of the Beta, Rey and Darth Maul, need to be rebalanced to a certain extent in my opinion. They're simply too powerful in close quarters, going through huge groups of enemy infantry, completely shutting down entire pushes. And in the case of final stages on Galactic Assault, we're talking about one area which you need to capture. So you have a Darth Maul, which is clearly the most powerful hero at current in the game, run in there. That's, if he knows what he's doing, GG. He's going to take out 20 players if he has to, and then, the rest of your team's going to be able to relatively easily run over the objective. So some more balancing to be done there, but other than that, generally the foundations are solid. Now on the back of all that information, now we move into who this game is meant for. Now first things first, this is a casual game. This is not a skill-orientated game. This is not a game orientated towards core gamers, gamers that want to spend 1,000 hours playing one game. That needs to be clear from the get-go. This is a casual experience to come home from on a Thursday, Friday night, play for an hour, and then cook some food and go to bed. This is not a game to open up on Saturday morning and play until Sunday morning, 24-hour live stream kind of style. That's just simply not what it's meant for. There's too many frustrating, random, unpredictable elements in the game to make this that kind of game. Furthermore, I don't think the skill gap is too huge simply because you're going to get killed by elite classes and stuff like that, which are simply going to just, ruin your day independent of how good you are at the game, unless you yourself are using one of the elite classes, one of the heroes, which often is not the case when you're fighting with other 20 players to actually get those classes. So there's just a huge amount of randomness, and that's fine if you're aware that what this game is about. It's a casual experience. If you're looking for a replacement for a core game or a new competitive game to rival CSGO, Overwatch, or Rainbow Six Siege, forget it. That's just not what this game is. You need to be aware of what you're buying. So personally for me, this game is interesting as kind of sideline to Battlefield 1, which is my core game, despite being relatively casual as well, which is of course something I'm not too pleased about nevertheless. It's going to be a nice kind of warm-up, say play it an hour before you start going into Battlefield 1, but it's not a game I'm going to invest 1,100 hours into as I have already in Battlefield 4, or at this stage 400 or 500 hours in Battlefield 1. That's simply not the case. Nevertheless, also on the back of its relatively good DLC policy, which I'm a huge supporter of. Personally for me, it's a buy. However, that's going to depend individually for you on what kind of gamer you are, what you're looking for, and what you enjoy. Now, that being said, I'd love to hear your opinion on Star Wars Battlefront 2, on the beta, on the game itself. Are you already looking forward to actually getting the game when it comes out in November? Have you already pre-ordered it? Would you like to see some Star Wars Battlefront content on this channel? It is obviously not going to take over as main game for this channel simply because this is a Battlefield channel and this is going to stay a Battlefield channel, but I'm certainly open to making some guides, some tips and tricks videos, or just some kind of live commentary style videos on Star Wars Battlefront 2 once it releases. Let me know all that down below in the comments, or hit me up more directly on Twitter if you want to. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Star Wars Battlefront 2 video.